Welcome everyone at this third episode of the Count County, where I try, with more or less success, to overcome my own speech impediments. Yay! Today we shall talk about Corruption Canada with most information. Not all, I do have some class notes over there and over there, but nonetheless most information comes from L'histoire inédite des Patriotes by Anne-Marie Sicotte, which treats of the life in Canada in the early 19th century. So, for this episode, just to give you an idea of the setting, at 18th century, towards the middle, there's the 100 Years' War. At some point, the forces of evil win. So at some point later, the US gained the independence and have the awful idea of sending all the traitors north rather than back to England, and now Canadians are stuck with them. In this new setting, life is hard for anyone who is not an anglosaxon Anglican. Granted, the other anglosaxon can get ahead in life. They can do stuff, do not as far as the Anglicans want. Not forget that not Anglo-Saxons are victims of lots of racism and discrimination, and are put in a ladder, a scale of how well perceived are various races. On top, you have different white groups that are not Catholics, and the further you go, the worse it gets. At some point, you've got Asians and blacks, and that's just to give you an idea. Royalists in Higher Canada, which is nowadays Ontario, at some point they refused that a group of black citizens get their own village because they complained that the other would go downwind and make life unlivable for them. This is the type of individuals we speak about. Oh, and of course, at the bottom of the bottom, the burly citizens, you had various Catholic groups, namely anyone who was of French descent / spoke French, and the Irish. The only way, if you were of French descent or an Irish, to get out of this classification, and even then not completely, would be to be a traitor and basically sell your soul to the devil by joining this or that evil groups like the Orangists. So, as you can guess, for the normal citizen, this wasn't a fun time. It could have been if the English were not there. But nonetheless, so to give you an idea of how bad was the corruption, let's watch the different different places in the social ladder. So on the top you have the government, where you have the governors. They have their nice life, and there's of course their friends who are there only because they are in good relation with the governors and the monarchy and whatnot. In Lower Canada, so in modern day Quebec, you have La Clique du Château. Of course, none of them could have understood that term because they were all English speaking, and their name could be translated to the Castle Cabal. And to give you an idea, these of course were devoid of any form of morality, and they were basically You're a clean-cut cartoon villain member of the government. In Higher Canada, they had the Family Compact. You could also call them Nepotism Incorporated, to give you an idea. They were basically the same. It's just that they were in a different colony because both parts of Canada were not fused yet. Going down lower, you had the law enforcement with the judges and other representative of the law. So, unless the odd good person managed to get there thanks to the education to one of the that came from the Catholic Church, that was one of the very few good things that normal people had. Your average judge was once again this anglosaxon prick devoid of integrity, or at least another form of royalist. So most trials, if we could call them that, were a neuter farce. These were the type of joke you'd almost expect from the Joker. Going down even more, of course, you had the company's honor, once again part of the rich strata of society that could get away with pretty much anything and almost had people in conditions of slavery. It was not quite slavery, but not far off. And what few people managed to get some decent condition, namely peasants, Evelyn had to do lots of charity work to help people work in these factories. And assuming you somehow manage to gain some money and think, hey, I could get into transportation with them new steamboats, well, the massively corrupt aristocrats and oligarchs, what would they do? They would use their own ship, they would ram you, they're trying to create as much damage as they could to your ship, and if not, still try to get your ship from you. And then they had professional fake witnesses that would give false testimony in these pseudo trials to get you convicted, and those who would lose everything and they would most likely gain it. Because yes, professional false witness were a thing at that time. So as you can guess, the situation was really incredibly shitty. At that point, the pseudo-democracy that was just a facade to give illusions, they could vote on a budget, but it never came down to anything. They had no real power because Family Compact and Clique du Château had all the power in themselves. That was not in the hands of the army or the governor. So at some point, the Patriots, led by the great Papineau, tried to have 92 resolutions, sent them to London. These were of course all rejected because I won't convince anyone that there was any good in the English Parliament either, or the Crown. When these were rejected, pushed to the last options, and also after subishing numerous attacks by a group called the Ultra-Tories. Who are the Ultra-Tories, you may ask? Take in the US the worst groups of pseudo far-right militia, take the WAPs, take the KKK, mix it all together, and even there you're not as messed up as the Ultra-Tories. In fact, it is really hard to talk about them without comparing them to this one supremacist group you may have heard of called the National Socialists. They did a bit of trouble in the 30s and 40s. And it's so yeah, talking about the terrorists without getting a good point, it is hard. These guys did lots of arson, intimidation, attempted murder and whatnot. They always got away, of course. And in this situation, then the Patriots came in. That's support from both Canada, by the way. So not only the French speaker one like them, the English speaker too, because everyone was oppressed. They had a lot of popularity, and these 92 resolutions were kind of liked by anyone who was aware of and was not part of the ruling caste. So they represented pretty much the people in general. They tried it was called a rebellion, but a better word would be an attempt at getting things better, so it failed. Many of them were hanged due to the farcical trials they were victim of. And following that, a few years after, when there was a new governor in place, said new governor was not as racist as the Ultra-Tory, and what he wanted was to have money for the crown and its lackeys. Therefore, he wanted to have people who have stuff to steal. They had to have people to oppress that have stuff worth oppressing. So he did decide to use money to the reconstruction of the massive damage. We speak values in millions in the time of millions of dollars of the Canadian dollar of the time. So even more nowadays of damage. He tried to start a reconstruction effort, and because this was not as mean as they'd like, the authorities burned down in 1843 the Canadian Parliament, which was in Montreal. Then later on, the Parliament was brought from, if you want to see, from Montreal to Ottawa. And because Ottawa was a lumberjack village full of English-speaking people, so for the joke, Montreal, normal lumberjack, and actual civilization, Ottawa, the transvestite lumberjack you'd see in a Monty Python sketch. If I had to go with the joke, that. Of course, the terrorists got away with this basically terrorist act that was way worse than the assault on the Capitol we had recently. They got away, and the another time something similar was done. Well, the other two times similar things was during the 1812 war between England and the US. England did burn down the White House. A few years ago it was blamed on Canada, but it was England. Canada was just a pawn in this because it's an English colony. And the other time something similar was done was in 1933 by the National Socialists, who decided that their terrorists had a good idea, and as they did with many other things, to plagiarize them. In other words, the bad Austrian painter who liked Disney a lot had Japanese culture been as prevalent then as it is nowadays, he would have called the terrorists or just all the royalists and the English crown senpai, to give you an idea. So I hope with that you get a better understanding on how messed up things were in Canada. Things over time eventually got better. It took a long time, and we're still a long and far way to go. So I know this was a bit of a heavier episode. I do hope my pronunciation has improved, as well as my attempt to contain my habit to say the word "and" 100 times and other forms of speech impediment. And on this, I will bid you all farewell, and until the next English translation. You know what? Screw that. I'm going to call it the Stetian translation because it's also spoken in the US. So Stetian, yeah, Stetian translation of the Count Countcy. And farewell.